The canvas mat shuddered under 265 pounds of muscle when Marcus Iron Fist Holloway slammed his heel down during warm-ups, the sound echoing across the tournament hall like a hammer hitting concrete. Sweat rolled down the sides of his shaved head. The fluorescent lights above the arena reflected off the championship belt hanging from his duffel bag. 200 spectators filled the folding chairs surrounding the ring, their voices blending into a restless murmur. And 10 feet away, a much smaller man stood quietly with his hands open. Bruce Lee watched without moving. Marcus Holloway was not some random challenger trying to make a name for himself. He was already a name. At 29 years old, he weighed exactly 265 pounds, standing 6'4" with shoulders that looked carved from stone. He held 3 consecutive American full-contact karate championship titles. His knockouts were legendary in tournament circles. Of his last 18 matches, 14 had ended before the second round. Most fighters avoided him. Because Marcus didn't just hit hard, he hit with intent. His specialty was a devastating Gyakuzuki, reverse punch, thrown from deep hip rotation. When his rear fist drove forward, the kinetic chain traveled from the floor through his legs, hips, torso, and finally his shoulder like a coiled spring releasing. Judges called it one of the most powerful punches ever recorded in tournament karate. Opponents called it something else. A brick wall. The Los Angeles Invitational Karate Championship, May 1972, had already seen Marcus dominate 2 earlier matches that afternoon. One opponent lasted 47 seconds before collapsing from a body shot. The other managed nearly 2 minutes before Marcus caught him with a Mawashi Geri roundhouse kick that folded him sideways. Now he was cooling down near the edge of the mat, rolling his neck and flexing his hands. That's when he noticed the man everyone else seemed to be whispering about, Bruce Lee. Marcus had heard the stories. Everyone in the martial arts world had. A Chinese fighter who claimed traditional styles were too rigid. A man who taught something he called Jeet Kune Do, a system built on interception, speed, and efficiency, instead of fixed forms. Marcus didn't buy it. Not for a second. Because from where he stood, Bruce Lee didn't look like a fighter who could survive inside a full-contact ring. He looked small. Bruce weighed around 135 pounds that year. Marcus outweighed him by exactly 130, nearly double. Marcus leaned toward one of the nearby competitors, a brown belt named Tom Alvarez who had just finished his own match. "That him?" Marcus asked, nodding toward Bruce. Tom followed his gaze. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's Bruce Lee." Marcus studied him again. No gi. No belt. No tournament trophies sitting behind him, just a slim man in black training pants and a loose yellow jacket, standing near the edge of the mat, watching the matches like a curious observer. Marcus snorted. "That's the guy everyone's talking about?" Tom hesitated. "You should watch him move," he said. Marcus shook his head. "I don't need to watch." He cracked his knuckles slowly. Real fighting doesn't look like movies. The tension in the room began to shift. Because several competitors had already gathered near Bruce Lee during the break between matches, asking questions about footwork and striking angles. Some listened with fascination, others with skepticism. Marcus walked closer. Each step of his bare feet pressed into the mat with quiet authority. When the small circle of fighters saw him approaching, the conversation died instantly. Marcus stopped about 4 feet from Bruce. For a moment, neither man spoke. Bruce simply looked up, calm, curious. Marcus crossed his massive arms. "You're Bruce Lee." It wasn't a question. Bruce nodded once. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "You're the guy teaching people that karate is outdated." Bruce shook his head gently. "I teach efficiency." His voice was quiet, controlled. Marcus let out a short laugh. "Efficiency?" He gestured around the tournament hall. "These men train their whole lives to fight in here." His finger pointed at the mat. Pressure. Resistance. Real opponents. Then he pointed back at Bruce. You teach speed drills and wooden dummy routines." A few nearby fighters shifted uncomfortably. Marcus leaned forward slightly. "You've never fought someone my size." Bruce didn't answer immediately. He simply studied Marcus the way a mechanic studies a machine, looking at stance, weight distribution, shoulder tension. Finally, he spoke. "You might be right." Marcus smiled. It wasn't friendly. "So tell me something," he said. "If all that kung fu philosophy actually works—" He spread his arms slightly. "Why don't you prove it?" Now the surrounding fighters stopped breathing, because everyone understood what Marcus was suggesting. A challenge, and challenges inside a tournament venue carried consequences. The referee standing near the edge of the ring turned his head toward them. So did half the crowd. Bruce tilted his head slightly. "You want to spar?" Marcus shook his head. "No." His voice dropped lower. "I want to see if you're real." The silence deepened. Marcus stepped onto the edge of the mat. The canvas creaked under his weight. 200 spectators were now watching. Bruce glanced briefly at the ring, then back at Marcus. "You're a champion," Bruce said. Marcus nodded 3 times. Bruce stepped forward slowly until he stood on the mat as well. The height difference became obvious immediately. Marcus towered over him, nearly a foot taller, nearly twice the mass. Someone in the crowd whispered, "This is insane." Marcus rolled his shoulders once. "You still want to do this?" Bruce's answer was simple. "Yes." The referee hurried toward them. "Hold on," he said. "This isn't a scheduled match." Marcus raised a hand. "Relax." Then he looked down at Bruce. 4 seconds. The referee blinked. Marcus smirked. "That's all it'll take." And the arena suddenly felt very small. The referee hesitated in the center of the mat, glancing between the 2 men like someone standing between a train and the tracks. Marcus Holloway rolled his shoulders once more. The movement shifted nearly 300 pounds of muscle under his white karate gi. His black belt hung heavy at his waist, the embroidered gold characters marking 3 national championship victories. 200 spectators leaned forward in their folding chairs. Nobody spoke, because the size difference alone made the situation feel dangerous. Marcus was 6'4". Bruce Lee stood barely 5'7". Marcus weighed 265 pounds. Bruce Lee weighed about 135. The math didn't look fair. Marcus planted his left foot forward into a classic Zenkutsu Dachi front stance, the same stance used by countless karate fighters to generate maximum forward power. His rear heel pressed into the mat, hips angled slightly, shoulders relaxed but coiled. This stance wasn't decorative. It was engineered for impact. From this position, Marcus could fire his Gyakuzuki, reverse punch, with explosive hip torque, driving his rear fist forward with the full rotational force of his body weight. Against opponents his own size, it was devastating. Against someone half his size, it could end things instantly. Bruce noticed the stance immediately, but his own posture looked completely different. Instead of a rigid martial arts stance, he stood almost casually with his hands open and relaxed. His feet shifted lightly across the canvas in what Jeet Kune Do practitioners called the Bai-Jong stance, on guard intercepting stance, weight slightly forward. Lead hand floating between them, rear hand near the chin. His body angled like a fencer. It looked loose, but it wasn't. Every muscle in Bruce's frame was balanced for speed. Marcus glanced at the referee. "This isn't a match," he said. "Just a demonstration." The referee looked uncertain but nodded. "No strikes to the throat, no eye gouges." Marcus smirked. "You think he'll get that close?" A few nervous laughs came from the crowd. Bruce didn't react. He simply watched Marcus's shoulders. Because shoulders reveal intention before fists move. Marcus lifted his guard. Bruce shifted slightly, distance between them roughly 7 feet. In martial arts terms, this was called MIA, critical engagement distance. the space where one explosive step could turn observation into impact. Marcus bounced once on the balls of his feet, testing the canvas. Then he spoke again. "Ready?" Bruce nodded once. The referee raised his hand, then dropped it. Marcus exploded forward instantly. His front foot drove into the mat like a piston. His rear hip rotated violently. The Gyakuzuki, reverse punch, launched forward like a battering ram aimed directly at Bruce Lee's face. The biomechanics were textbook. Force began at the floor, transferred through Marcus's rear leg, through his hips, through his spine, through his shoulder, through his fist. A 265-pound mass accelerating forward behind a single strike. For most fighters, the correct response would be retreat, move backward, create space. Bruce did the opposite. He stepped forward. It happened so fast many spectators missed the moment entirely. Bruce's lead hand snapped forward in a pak-sao, slapping hand deflection, striking Marcus's punching wrist sideways just as the fist reached full extension. The deflection didn't try to stop the punch. Stopping a 265-pound punch would require equal force. Instead, it redirected the angle by only a few inches. That tiny shift mattered because punches are strongest at the exact line of force they were designed for. Move the line slightly, and the power collapses. Marcus's fist sliced past Bruce's cheek, close enough that several witnesses later said they could hear the wind from the punch. But Bruce was already inside the strike. Now the weight difference reversed. Marcus's punch had fully extended. His hips were committed, his balance momentarily forward. Bruce's right fist moved in a straight line, not a swing, not a hook. A direct thrust. This was the Jeet Kune Do straight lead punch, Bruce's signature technique. The punch traveled only 8 inches. But it moved with astonishing speed, because Bruce's lead shoulder snapped forward like a spring while his rear foot pushed lightly against the canvas, creating a short kinetic chain that prioritized velocity over mass. The fist landed, square, Marcus's sternum, right between the chest muscles. The impact made a dull sound, not loud, but sharp. Marcus's entire torso jolted backward slightly. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the arena went silent. Marcus blinked. His brain tried to process what had just happened. The punch hadn't looked powerful, but the biomechanics behind it were precise. Bruce had struck directly into the solar plexus nerve cluster, the bundle of nerves controlling diaphragm contraction. When hit correctly, the body forgets how to breathe. Marcus suddenly sucked in air, except nothing came. His diaphragm spasmed violently. His chest tightened. His lungs refused to expand. The entire sequence had taken less than 4 seconds. Bruce stepped back calmly, hands open again. Marcus staggered once, his knees bent slightly. One hand instinctively moved to his chest. 200 spectators watched in frozen silence, because the undefeated 265-pound karate champion was gasping for breath. And Bruce Lee hadn't even changed his expression. 3 seconds passed. Marcus finally managed a short breath. Then another. The referee stepped closer, unsure whether to stop things, but Marcus raised his hand slightly. "I'm fine." His voice sounded different now. Not weaker, but surprised. Marcus slowly straightened his posture. Then he looked at Bruce again. "Really look this time. You stepped into the punch," Marcus said quietly. Bruce nodded. Marcus exhaled slowly. "Why?" Bruce answered with only 4 words. "Shortest distance wins." The crowd murmured softly. Because what they had just witnessed wasn't brute force. It was timing. Marcus rolled his shoulders again, testing his breathing. His diaphragm still felt tight, but the air was coming back. He glanced at the referee, then back at Bruce. "That was fast," Marcus admitted, "but one strike doesn't prove anything." The crowd shifted again. Because the champion wasn't finished. Marcus planted his feet once more. This time, his stance changed. Instead of a traditional karate stance, he shifted into a wider guard, preparing for continuous exchange rather than a single committed punch. His eyes narrowed. "You ready again?" Bruce's answer came instantly. Yes. And this time, the next exchange would last longer than 4 seconds. Marcus Holloway inhaled slowly, testing his diaphragm again. The first breath had been shallow. The second came easier. By the third, the tight knot in his chest began to loosen. But the memory of that punch stayed with him. It hadn't looked powerful, yet it had shut his breathing down instantly. Marcus rolled his neck once, then looked down at Bruce Lee again with a new expression. Not anger, not humiliation. Focus, because champions don't survive long in combat sports without adapting. "You hit the nerve cluster," Marcus said quietly. Bruce nodded. Marcus rubbed his sternum once. Good placement. The crowd shifted in their chairs. The atmosphere had changed. What had started as a one-sided challenge was beginning to feel like something else. A test. Marcus raised his guard again. But this time his stance widened into a kumite guard, sparring stance, designed for fluid exchanges rather than single power strikes. His weight moved lighter onto the balls of his feet. He had adjusted, and adjustments are where great fighters become dangerous. Bruce noticed immediately. Marcus wasn't charging blindly anymore. He was studying. Distance between them again, roughly 7 feet. Marcus circled slowly to the right. Bruce mirrored the movement. 200 spectators watched the subtle dance of footwork. Neither man spoke. Marcus feinted a small shoulder twitch. Bruce didn't react. Marcus tried again, stepping forward slightly. Still nothing. Bruce remained balanced in his Baijong stance, lead hand floating between them like a censer. Marcus realized something important. Bruce wasn't reacting to feints. He was reacting to commitment. Marcus inhaled once more, then suddenly attacked. This time he didn't throw a straight punch. His right knee rose sharply as his hips rotated sideways. The movement launched a mawashi jeri, roundhouse kick, aimed directly at Bruce's ribs. The kick was terrifyingly fast for a man Marcus's size. Karate roundhouse mechanics rely on rotational momentum. Marcus' hips turned like a heavy door swinging on hinges, transferring his body mass through the thigh and into the shin. Against previous opponents, this kick had ended fights. Bruce moved, but not fast enough. The shin clipped his side. Not clean, but solid. The sound of impact echoed across the mat. Several spectators gasped. Because Bruce slid back nearly 2 feet across the canvas, Marcus landed smoothly and stepped forward immediately, pressing the advantage. This was his domain. Pressure. Continuous offense. Bruce recovered his balance quickly, but Marcus was already moving again. A left jab snapped forward. Then another. The punches were lighter than Marcus's earlier reverse punch, but they served a different purpose. They forced Bruce backward. Marcus stepped in again. Now the size difference mattered. Each step Marcus took covered nearly double Bruce's ground. Bruce circled to the left. Marcus cut the angle. Another jab. Then a sudden uramawashi geri, hook kick, whipped upward toward Bruce's head. Bruce ducked under it. But the motion forced him closer to Marcus than he wanted, and Marcus saw it. This was the moment. Marcus drove forward with his full body weight and launched a crushing oizuki, stepping lunge punch, aimed directly at Bruce's chest. This punch carried even more mass than the earlier strike, because Marcus's entire body was moving behind it. Several spectators stood from their chairs, because if that punch landed clean, Bruce Lee would go down. Bruce moved. But this time it looked late. The punch came dangerously close. Close enough that Marcus's knuckles brushed Bruce's jacket. The crowd erupted in noise. For the first time, the 265-pound champion had nearly connected cleanly. Marcus' eyes flashed. He felt momentum shift. Bruce pivoted quickly to the side to escape the follow-up, but Marcus pressed forward again. Another jab. Another step. Bruce retreated 2 steps toward the edge of the mat. And suddenly the situation looked very different. Because Bruce Lee was moving backward. 200 spectators felt the tension spike. Had the first strike just been luck? Marcus raised his guard again, breathing steady now. "You're fast," he said. Bruce didn't answer. Marcus smiled slightly. "But power changes things." The crowd murmured again. Because the champion was gaining confidence, Marcus rolled his shoulders and stepped forward once more. And this time Bruce didn't retreat. He stepped forward instead, directly into Marcus's reach. Marcus's eyes widened slightly. Because fighters rarely move toward a larger opponent's power. Bruce's lead foot slid forward a few inches. His lead hand lifted slightly. Marcus recognized the distance instantly. This was inside kicking range, but just outside punching range. Marcus prepared to fire again, but Bruce's eyes had locked onto something else. Marcus's lead shoulder. The moment it twitched, Bruce moved. And what happened next took less than 2 seconds. Marcus's lead shoulder twitched. That tiny movement meant one thing. Attack was coming. Bruce saw it before the punch even began. Because in striking combat, the fist never moves first. The shoulder does. Bruce's weight shifted forward a fraction of an inch. Marcus stepped in. His left foot drove forward and his hips began to rotate again. The motion launched another Gyakuzuki, reverse punch, the same strike that had nearly flattened opponents twice, Bruce Lee's size earlier that afternoon. But this time Bruce moved first, not backward, forward. His lead hand snapped out in a paksao, slapping hand deflection, striking Marcus's punching wrist sideways before the fist could reach full acceleration. The redirection was small, only a few inches, but it collapsed the straight-line power of the punch. Marcus felt the deflection instantly. But Bruce was already inside. His rear foot slid forward behind the lead, creating a compact forward burst known in Jeet Kune Do as a burst step, explosive forward shuffle. The move closed distance faster than Marcus expected. Now the Masu champion faced a problem. At close range, his long arms became slower to reset. Bruce's fist shot forward. The Jeet Kune Do straight lead punch. It traveled only inches, but it landed sharply on Marcus's jaw. The sound cracked through the arena like a snapped board. Marcus's head jerked sideways. Before his brain processed the hit, Bruce's left hand fired again. A lapsao, grabbing hand trap, hooked Marcus's lead wrist and pulled it slightly downward, opening a clear lane through the center line of Marcus's guard. In traditional martial arts theory, this space is called the center line, the vertical axis running from eyes to throat to solar plexus. Control that line. Control the fight. Bruce did exactly that. His right fist struck again. Another straight lead, this time into Marcus's chest, directly into the solar plexus, the same nerve cluster he had hit earlier. Marcus's diaphragm spasmed again, but Bruce wasn't finished. His rear leg whipped upward in a sharp oblique kick, Jeet Kune Do, stop kick, striking Marcus's lead thigh just above the knee. The technique wasn't meant to knock him down. It disrupted the base. Marcus's weight shifted backward instinctively. The entire combination had taken barely 2 seconds. 3 strikes, 3 precise targets. Jaw. Solar plexus. Lead leg. Bruce stepped back calmly, hands open again. Marcus froze. For a moment his body simply stopped responding. 200 spectators stared in absolute silence, because the 265-pound karate champion had just been hit 3 times before he could throw a second punch. Marcus staggered once, then caught himself. His lungs fought for air again, but this time he didn't collapse. He simply stood there, breathing slowly, processing what had happened. Bruce waited quietly. No celebration. No taunting. Just stillness. Finally, Marcus lifted his head. His breathing had steadied again. He looked at Bruce Lee with an expression the audience had not seen before. "Respect. You intercepted everything," Marcus said quietly. Bruce nodded once. Marcus rubbed his jaw where the first punch had landed. You didn't wait for the attack. Bruce spoke softly, intercepting. Marcus gave a short laugh. That's what Jeet Kune Do means, right? Bruce nodded again. The way of the intercepting fist. The crowd slowly began to murmur, because the meaning of the exchange was becoming clear. Marcus stepped back once. Then again. The champion raised his hands. But this time it wasn't a guard. It was surrender. All right, Marcus said. That's enough. The referee exhaled in relief and stepped between them. For several seconds nobody moved. Then the spectators began clapping, not loudly, but steadily. Marcus extended his hand. Bruce shook it. Marcus looked down at him, still slightly breathless. I thought speed drills were tricks, Marcus admitted. Bruce said nothing. Marcus continued, but you weren't faster because you moved more. He tapped his chest once. You were faster because you moved sooner. Bruce finally spoke. Timing beats size. Marcus nodded slowly. The words didn't sound like a lesson. They sounded like a realization. Marcus turned toward the audience. Many of the competitors in the room had trained for years under strict traditional systems, forms, rigid stances, preset techniques. Marcus had believed in that structure completely. Until now. He looked back at Bruce. How long did that exchange take? He asked. Bruce thought for a moment. 2 seconds. Marcus shook his head slightly, almost laughing. 2 seconds, he repeated. The same man who had promised to finish the fight in 4. Marcus stepped off the mat and grabbed a towel from his bag. Then he turned back toward Bruce one last time. You know something? Marcus said. Bruce waited. Marcus smiled slightly. I came over here to expose a fraud. He paused. Instead, he extended his hand again. I found a teacher. Bruce bowed his head slightly, and the arena, full of fighters who had just witnessed the exchange, remained completely silent. Because sometimes the loudest lesson is delivered in 2 seconds, and nobody in that room forgot it.